À, cho nó đi ra.
Ya, kamu nanti masak ya. Okay. Good evening from Indonesia, everyone. So we will start the webinar today, and welcome to today's webinar, part of the Road to the World Public Relations Forum 2024, a global communication knowledge conference series. I'm Anggia from Perhumas. We are thrilled to have all of you here with us today as we gear up for the highly anticipated WPRF, which will take place from November 19 and 22nd to 2024 at Merusaka, Nusa Dua, Bali, Indonesia. This webinar series is designed to better prepare participants for the upcoming conference by providing valuable insight, expertise, and knowledge across various aspects of public relations and communication. We are fostering this discussion to enrich our understanding, ensuring the public relations profession is the forefront of meaningful and purposeful influence. The purpose of this global communication knowledge conference is to lay the groundwork for what will be pivotal global event in the field of public relations. As part of the lead up to WPRF, this webinar series aims to engage professionals, academics, and practitioners in broader discussion around the evolving role of PR, while also equipping participants with the tools and strategies to contribute meaningful to the forum. Excuse me. WPRF 2024 theme, Purposeful Influence for the Common Good, highlights the shifting roles and goals of the public relations professions as it adapts to rapidly transforming global environment. This theme resonates deeply with the current times, emphasizing the significant responsibility that comes with shaping public opinion and influencing behavior. The World Public Relations Forum stands as a premier global conference hosted by the Global Alliance for Public Relations and Communication Management. It brings together professionals, academics, and industry leaders from around the world for a vibrant exchange of ideas, strategies, and best practices. This year, forum in Bali, co-hosted by Perhumas, the Indonesia Public Relations Association, and organized by Kata Data Indonesia, will address the challenge and opportunities with our industry, fostering dialogue and innovation, ethics, and PR evolving role in society. So WPRF is more than a conference. It's celebration of the diversity and dynamism of our profession. It underscores that the importance of communication in building and maintaining trust between organizations and their public, offering a unique opportunity to gain global perspective and forge connections with the peers from different culture backgrounds. So for today webinar session, we are honored to have our moderator, Associate Professor Dr. Janet Maria Pinaria. How are you, ma'am? Dr. Janet Maria Pinaria. Hi. Who currently serves as the Vice Rector 1 for Academic Affairs at the Institute of Communication and Business LSPR. Dr. Janet has a strong research interest in communication management, public relations, and crisis communication. Please welcome Dr. Janet Maria Pinaria, who will be our host or moderator for this webinar. Strategic Communication, Road to WPRF, Global Communication Knowledge Conference.
Thank you, Ms. Anggia, for introducing me. Hello, everyone. Warm greetings from Jakarta, Indonesia. Thank you for having me become a moderator for this discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, let's connect this today important topic, unlocking strategic communication for global impact. One of the key ways scholars and professionals can participate in the call for paper for WPRF 2024 is by contributing research that align with the theme of purposeful influence for the common goods, strategic communication, and plays a pivotal role in advancing this theme as it can amplify message, shape perception, and drive global impact. And today, this is a really great forum that we have a highlight how professionals can unlock the power of strategic communication to enhance global outreach and influence. Our prominent speakers, the world-class professor, will share some insight and discuss about the key strategies for developing and implementing communication plan that not only achieve organizational goals, but also contribute the global dialogues on public relations, purpose, and the common good. As we look forward to receiving impactful research from the WPRF's call for paper, this is an important opportunity for academicians and professionals, students, and scholars to share innovative ideas that contribute to the shaping the future of global communications. So, we are really honored to have three distinguished speakers with us today. Our world-class professor who will guide us through today's webinar. So I will introduce our speakers. First one, Professor Timothy Combs. Hello, Professor. Very good morning.
Good morning to you.
Yeah. Professor Combs is a professor of the communications at Texas Agriculture and Mechanical University and a leading expert in crisis management. As a key member of the International Communication Association, he has spearheaded numerous studies on the crisis communications and organizational reputations. His globally recognized works has the help organization develop effective communication strategies to navigate crisis and safeguard their reputation. And then the second panelist, we have Professor Nosher Contractor. How are you, Professor?
Very good. Good evening to you
Very
in
good.
Indonesia.
Very good morning. He is a professor at Northwestern University, specializing in the social network analysis, organizational communications, and digital innovations. He is an influential member of ICA with substantial contribution to research on digital collaboration and interaction. His interdisciplinary work has been widely recognized, advancing the understanding of the social connection with organization and the broader digital society. And the third one, professor from Indonesia, Profesor Dorin Kartikawangi. Halo Profesor Dorin, apa kabar? How are you?
Kabar baik. I'm fine. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Professor Dorin is the distinguished academic and communication practitioner, currently serving the vice chair of the Perhumas and the ICA Indonesia chapter chair. And also, she is a coordinator for WPRF Global Knowledge Conference. Professor Dorian, she has an extensive experience in strategic communications and public relations, is actively engaged in advancing research and practice in Indonesia. Her dedication to communication development at both national and international levels continues to strengthen Indonesian reputation on the global stage. Also, in the wonderful moment, I would like also to welcome our special guest from International Communication Association, Professor Padma Rani, Chair of ICA India Chapter. Hello, Professor Padma. And Sister Professor Agnes Lucilando, Chair of ICA Kenya chapter, represented by Miss Kenyaki. Hello. And then Ekata George, Chair of ICA Nigeria chapter. Wow, it's this really amazing moment for us. So, before we start the panel discussion, let's capture this moment together. I would like to kindly ask everyone to turn on your cameras for the quick photo session or screen soon. So we will have a commemorating today's event and celebrating our collective participation for the exciting journey. So may I ask admin for the Zoom to take a photo? Okay,
Sure, ma'am.
ready, everyone?
Ready, ma'am?
Okay, give the
Okay.
best smile of you. Okay, 1, 2, 3, cheers. Okay, once again. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and last one. 1, 2, 3. Okay, yes, very good, excellent. So, yes, this is the time for us to, before we dive into the presentation, I would like to inform everyone about the format of today's webinar. Each our three speakers will present their insight consecutively, and following their presentation, we will open the floor for the Q&A session. So feel free to type your questions into the chat box at any time while presentations are ongoing, and I will keep track of your questions and bring them during a discussion after all the speakers have concluded their talk. So, without further more, let me introduce our first speakers, Professor Timothy Combs. Professor Combs, the screen is yours.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate this chance to talk to you all. I've been to Indonesia about 4 or 5 times. In fact, I'll be back there in November. I'll be at the EGA briefings at their annual meetings out in Bali. So it's a wonderful country. I wish I was there now and not just remotely. I've always enjoyed my visits there. Let me share the screen here. So we're talking about strategic communication and that work. Okay. I got a little bit ahead of myself in there. Okay, so we're going to talk about strategic communication and what it can mean, particularly its impacts upon societies, because it's both a challenge and a benefit to society. And I see communication primarily as a way of meeting some of the challenges that society can face, particularly when we start talking about what can public relations do, what can it contribute. And want to look at that really kind of through 3 points. Start with a little bit just some background about crisis and risk, and then where communication can enter into that process, and look specifically at an application of developing societal good, and then just end up thinking about some of the challenges that all of us face as we start taking this forward. And I say all of us because whether you're academic or in the practice, we're using communication to try and better the world in some way. And I made that transition. I've left academics and I've moved more to the practitioner side to try and get out more and go from teaching students in the classroom to training and working with communication professionals who are out there on the front lines, whether it's disaster or public health, kind of working on these sorts of issues that they encounter. A little bit about just kind of crisis and risk. So, we do a lot of research in this area, but what does that really mean? And I think what we can do when we talk about risk, risk is the potential to do harm. So think of it this way. You're going to go out and you're going to go hiking in a beautiful area, a lot of nature. And nature's good and bad because some of nature's kind of dangerous. So there are snakes in the area that are venomous. So that's a risk. So you go out on your hike knowing, oh, yeah, there are snakes out there. Well, as you're walking along in the distance, you see a snake. Well, that's an issue because that's the emergence of a risk, because now that risk is real for you because you can see the snake. And if that snake happens to bite you, that's a realization of the risk, and that's a crisis because now you really need to do something, and you need to do something pretty quickly. And those choices can have an impact upon your health. The same way when we start talking about crisis and risk communication, that has impacts upon people's lives. And no matter, we'll talk about different sectors, whether you're public sector or you're working for the government. Yeah, you know you have a strong responsibility to your constituents and what you do. And that deals with various issues related to disaster preparedness, to getting messages out about public health. NGOs are an important part of that. They supplement, they represent voices. It's an important part of that. And corporations can help with that as well, because what they do can affect people, particularly in matters related to chemical issues, safety, and those sorts of things. And we'll kind of draw all these points together here with an illustration in a minute. But it's important to remember that what you communicate or fail to communicate has consequences for people. Oftentimes people think, oh, well, you're just talking. No, the information you provide or the information you fail to provide can have serious consequences for people. Right now, the UN is very active in trying to increase the idea of warnings for disasters globally, because they know that is one of the ways to help people and to reduce the number of deaths each year that occur from disasters. And here are just some examples. In the public sector, you have disaster preparedness and response. That's part of your job, to make sure that your people are safe. And in a location like Indonesia and many parts around the world, tsunamis are important. Not so important where I live because we're nowhere near water, but we have other disasters to worry about. We worry about tornadoes to a large degree. So these weather-related events are critical. Public sector needs to help with that. NGOs are there to help reaching those in need and providing a voice for the marginalized in the discussions. And that's a really critical role that I want to bring up, because oftentimes when we start talking about disaster preparedness and extension of this to public health, the marginalized aren't part of that. That the public sector is concentrating on what they view as their primary constituents, the marginalized get left behind. It's often up to the NGOs to provide those voices for them. In corporations, they can extend preparedness to their constituents, thinking beyond their organizations. And the really forward-thinking companies are doing this. They're thinking about, how can I better prepare for the people living around me to prepare if I have a crisis event as an organization? And corporations are also thinking about, how can they contribute to public sector efforts as well? And that's an important part of it, because they can be part of that disaster response by providing goods and services, by providing logistics supports, and just different types of planning and needs that the public sector and the NGOs may not have that the corporations can supply. Examples of that in the United States are major retailers such as Walmart and Home Depot have extensive databases and knowledge about what people need during a disaster event. So you tell them the type of disaster, they know exactly what people need. They do that so they can move those supplies in and sell them to people. But that information is also helpful to those in the public sector who are planning as well. So there can be this sharing of information, and something that will benefit all in the end. So let's talk about this as an application, because that's abstraction. And, this isn't just theory, because really good theory helps to solve real world problems. That's the way I've always looked at it and how I approach my research. And I want to talk about extreme heat events. And this is a statement made by the United States Secretary General Antonio Guterres. And it's the idea that it's the end of the global warming. That's over. We're now into global boiling has arrived. And what he's talking about is the rise and the impact of extreme heat events. Extreme heat events in some parts of the world are already the #1 killer as related to weather events. And fairly soon, it will be globally the #1 killer when it comes to weather events. So that's in comparison to tsunamis, to hurricanes, tornadoes, to floods, landslides, earthquakes, volcanoes. It is extreme heat. That is the future of what we need to deal with and be thinking about. And some forward-thinking locations globally have embraced that idea, and some have appointed chief heat officers and are working on plans to deal with these extreme heat events. And this is a chance now. This is the ground floor. A lot of our other disaster and preparedness has been around for decades. But if you're building something from scratch, you have the potential to make it better. Because these existing disaster structures, you try and layer in new ideas. How can we be helped through technology, such as using, virtual and augmented reality for training. How might we use AI in predictive events? That we can add in. But with extreme heat events, from the ground floor, we can start building something better using existing technology, but also existing concerns for marginalized people who are often left out of this process that goes on here. So you talk about what are sometimes called heat wave action plans. That's one option that you have. Sometimes it's just called extreme heat events. Heat wave is used because you can name a heat wave, and what researchers have found with disasters is when you can name it, like a storm, people take it more seriously. So that's why you name all these events. It used to just be like hurricanes that were named, but now, you name everything, including heat waves. So the concerns, because the marginalized are frequently ignored in disaster and crisis planning. And this includes the early work on heat action plans. When you look at those plans, where are the marginalized communities in them? They're not really represented. And that can be problematic because if they're not represented, they probably will not be reached during these events. Because if you're not on the radar in the planning, how can you expect to then reach them with your communication messages? And when you're talking about something like a disaster that is weather related, everyone is your constituent. You don't have just, oh, who do we pick and choose, as we often do in public relations campaigns, like these are our target audiences. No, you're responsible for everyone because everyone can be affected by this. And in this example, I want to focus on the voices of the houseless in heat action planning. And the reason for this is typical of disasters. And just today, the UN put out a statement talking about how people are disproportionately affected by disasters, and it falls more upon the marginalized and those who have been made at risk. And the houseless are one of those when it comes to extreme heat events. They are there, they are out in the elements. They are the ones who are going to suffer the most during the heat events. Also, typical with marginalized populations, they have the least amount of resources to cope with this. A good example of that is when people are told to evacuate an area. Well, that's all well and good if you have transportation or access to transportation. But when you don't have access to transportation, how do you evacuate for it? That becomes a problem. And you can't really evacuate for heat emergencies. Heat emergencies are dealt more with. One of the key components of that are cooling centers. But once more, people have to know cooling centers exist, and they have to have ways of getting to those cooling centers. And the houseless are often left out of those discussions to their detriment, and often, with an increased number of deaths. What has been developed is what's called a community process partner model. And this was developed by the government, but it tries to be broad and incorporate this. And actually NGOs are critical to this because NGOs are often representative of marginalized groups such as the houseless. And they need to be incorporated into the planning process. And that hasn't been happening to a very large degree. So when it comes to planning for disasters, you kind of know your community, you identify who they are and who you're going to bring in, but you don't always think, oh, hey, those NGOs who represent various groups, let's bring them in. Because they would be ideal for you to understand that marginalized population and to build their needs and ways to reach them communicatively into your model. But we often don't think about it that way, but it needs to be. So part of this process, you identify and engage your stakeholders, your partners. And as government entities in the public sector, you need to start thinking more broadly. You need to think, who else beyond who we already know? What groups are out there doing important work that can help me reach constituents that I'm currently not reaching? And I think COVID really brought that home to a lot of people in public health. And I did some training prior to and after COVID with people in public health. And it has been that realization, like, we've been missing people. And in part, it relates to the digital divide and thinking that, oh, if I just use digital channels, I reach everyone. But beyond that thinking, yeah, there are constituents. We could better serve our broader constituents for them. So think of ways to find them. Integrate these partners into the planning. Make them part of the process. When you have your planning meetings, make them a part of it. Hear their voices. Then you test your partner dissemination pathways. Your partners are going to be important voices for you. This is a lesson that was learned many times and often hasn't been heard enough, but Katrina was one example of that. That they realized that these messages are coming from sources that aren't trusted by your constituents. Same thing we saw during COVID, and this was a global issue. It's like, I just don't trust the government and what they're saying. These partners, particularly the NGOs, other community members, such as religious leaders, civic leaders, can be credible message sources for you and help to deliver your messages. So when you provide a warning, provide information, they're more likely to listen and to respond positively to it. And then you have to sustain this partner network. You have to keep people involved within the communication process as you update your planning processes, as you adapt your system, make sure they're still part of that discussion and they feel involved within it. And it's a way of just broadening your reach to your constituency, to hearing various voices so that when a disaster does hit, you can reach them. So the messaging will reach them. It's messages that they will understand. And understanding can be language, but understanding can also be complexity of the messages. And they will be more receptive to the message if they're coming from sources that they find credible and acceptable to themselves. Because, again, sometimes the government, for many constituents, can be viewed more as a threat than as really a helpful partner in all of this. So that's a real broad overview without getting into a lot of details about it. But it's just a sense that communication plays a vital role in all of this when we start talking about getting ready for disasters and planning for that. And the people who are communication professionals in any of these areas, public, NGOs, and corporate, can be a part of that. Corporations, when it comes to heat, are a little bit on the outside, but corporations can be important in providing cooling centers, whether they provide spaces for that or they contribute fundings to help run those cooling spaces. Corporations can also be important in providing links for ways to transport people to these cooling centers to make sure they can get that relief from the heat. So we shouldn't ignore the corporate efforts from this, see how they would want to get involved. Corporations are looking for ways to expand their ways to be better community members, and these heat events are ones where that can be done. So we can see where all three units, the public, the NGOs, and the corporate, can work together on this. It will be driven by the public sector because it is their responsibility to drive forward that sort of disaster planning, particularly around extreme heat events. But NGOs are going to be critical to that process as they can provide representation for marginalized voices and means to communicate with those marginalized communities. And corporations can provide some logistical help. They can also provide some of the training that might be necessary as well to help with that and to work on your communication plans for these sorts of extreme events that come about. But all this is not without its challenges. None of this is easy. If it was, we would be a much better prepared world. When disasters happen, there'd be much fewer injuries and deaths. But what we do know is that if we take the time and effort to think about the planning and to be better prepared, and what we're now talking about kind of being ready for these types of crises and disasters, you can reduce the number of injuries. You can reduce the number of deaths. And that is a global phenomenon that shows that if you go from unprepared to prepared, you see a huge drop in the amount of the human toll that a disaster can take upon a community. So we think about these challenges. The digital divide is one of them. How are you reaching all your constituents? Again, this was learned the hard way during COVID. The people like, well, how do we reach these people? Like, gee, they're not on social media. How can we get them? Some people still have landlines, and some people still use the newspapers. And sometimes you actually have to go out into a community face to face to make contact with them. And that's one of the keys in reaching the houseless is that If you reach out through the NGOs who work with the houseless, they can go out personally and make contact with key members in the houseless community to help spread the messages, because like any other network, communication network, the houseless have theirs, and it can spread very quickly. But you need to know how to enter that network, and the NGOs know how to do that. So it's just thinking about how to reach all of our constituents and not thinking that, oh, wow, digital is the answer to everything. Digitalization is great, provides a lot of tools, but it's not the end all be all. There is always still interpersonal communication that matters, and those contacts are important, even in disaster planning for it. We have AI as threat and opportunities that are out there. The threat part is very clear in misinformation and disinformation. I'm currently working with one of the agencies within the UN on a project related to that. And, misinformation lacks intention. Disinformation is intentionally getting out bad information to people. You see this trying to influence things such as elections are one of them. But misinformation and disinformation can be deadly during disasters. If people get the wrong information, they go to the wrong locations. If they don't understand that they shouldn't be in a particular area, they go into that area, that can be a risk to their health or to their lives. So misinformation, disinformation is problematic. This has been at the forefront of disaster managers' thinking since the advent of social media platforms, because the risk has always been if there are bad actors putting information out there on social media and they use that information to help decide where to go, where to distribute resources, they could fail in their jobs because they're acting on bad information. And how do we tell that data, that potentially very valuable data on social media, tell us more about where the problem sites are? How can we really verify that? How can we vet that information? So it is problematic in that nature. And really on the opportunities front is predictive AI. Predictive AI is being used very widely for disaster events that are weather related. And they're even using predictive AI to better understand when earthquakes and volcanoes might occur. Now, for those, you're looking at a pretty big window. It's not like, oh, there's going to be one tomorrow. You're oftentimes looking at weeks, months, years, but it can give you better information, because the predictive AI essentially looks at large historical databases and can find the patterns. And as the humans look through and evaluate those patterns, they're being able to better predict these weather-related phenomenon that are related to disasters. So that's a big help to those on the other side. So whether you're in the public sector, the NGO, or the corporate, this predictive AI is very useful to help you enhance and improve your process for early warnings for people, executing those early warnings, and helping then people to recover from those situations. So what I've done is just tried to kind of give you a quick overview, sort of the work in my area, crisis and risk communication, and how that relates to how communication can be used to address a lot of society's concerns. And I wanted to focus on extreme heat events because they're growing in importance, and to illustrate through the houseless population the way that the marginalized can be better incorporated within it. Because while communication is a very robust and useful tool, it's not helpful if it's not reaching everyone it should during these extreme events. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Professor Timothy Combs, for those valuable insight. And the fun fact is, it's my great pleasure to be on the same screen with you, Professor, because your concept, your books is my guiding for teaching in my class about the crisis communication. So this is the best moment for me, especially. So thank you for your sharing.
You're welcome. I'm glad that those books are helpful.
Yeah. And let's move on the second speakers, Professor Nasser, contractor. Hello, Professor Nasser. Are you ready?
Yes, I am. Just give me
Okay.
a second to see if I can share my screen, and then we will take it from there.
Okay, So I offer to you, Professor Nasser, the screen is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you able to see the screen okay?
Yes, yes, all good.
Oh, great. Okay. First of all, it is truly an honor to be a part of this, the road to the forum, to the World Public Relations Forum. Thank you so much for inviting me. I will also say it is a distinct honor for me to share a platform with our distinguished speaker, Professor Tim Coombs, who is a very highly regarded scholar in communication and certainly has been a long time stalwart of the International Communication Association. So with that as humble sort of introduction here, I want to talk a little bit about the role of what was along with the theme of this particular forum, but focusing on social influence. And I've titled it Integrating Who to Influence with How to Influence. And if that's not clear, I'm sure it will be clear very soon, because that's sort of been an important takeaway message that I would like to leave you with from today's presentation. Okay, so let me get turn on the laser pointer and let me go ahead and get started. Okay, so I'm going to talk today mostly about, in the context in which I'm going to describe this, is work that my colleagues and I have been working on when it comes to one of the big grand societal challenges. Tim has already referred to many of the societal challenges and crises that we face. I'm going to focus specifically on one that has to do with global health. And so a lot of the work that I'm going to talk about today is actually work that I have done that has been funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And it's something that some of us in the global South, some of us like me who was born in the global South, and some of you who are joining right now from the global South are very, very aware of. Take, for instance, the case of the tragedy of neonatal mortality. Every year, 300,000 mothers and more than 6 million children die around the time of birth, largely in poorer countries. Many of these deaths are due to events that occur during or shortly after delivery. Death rates in India, the country where I was born, have fallen, but they are still 10 times greater than in high-income countries. Now, the good news is that we have possible tools to address this tragedy. Here's an example of a story about chlorhexidine that was published almost 10 years ago now, in which people, due to work that has been funded by and research conducted by organizations like USAID and several others, have found that chlorhexidine has, in fact, a lot of potential to reduce neonatal mortality. It's a liquid topical solution, which, if applied to the umbilical cord shortly after birth, has the ability to reduce neonatal mortality by 24% among those compared to those who did not receive it. That's pretty remarkable to think about how this tool can exist right now. Another study that was also done and published in Lancet found that it was reducing it by about 20%. So that's the good news. The problem is, and the other advantage is that it's very cheap. You can buy it at almost zero price. There is no supply problem. And it can be definitely used all over the world. In fact, one of the things that happened was that people at the places like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation thought that they could declare victory because they had found a way to solve the neonatal mortality problem. However, they realized that providing the supply is only half of the solution. Creating the demand is the other half of the solution. Why is it that even if something is available, people are not using it? And that was when folks in the global health arena realized that as much as science and developing these innovations is important, seeing how to socially influence people into using these innovations is a separate challenge, and maybe an even more striking challenge in that respect. Another example that I will touch on today is moving from neonatal mortality on the one hand to fertility rates. If you look at the statistics on that in the last decade, globally, women are having fewer babies, but fertility still remains very high in some parts of the world. And of course, it is highest in places like sub-Saharan Africa, where the rates are very high, even though, as you can see from this graph here, Sub-Saharan Africa is the one that is increasing as compared to many other parts of the world, including parts of the developed world, where it is staying flat. Why is this a problem? Because it's exactly in those areas of the world where we still have a lot of poverty, we have a lot of health issues, where fertility continues to be a big challenge in this area. So again, are there solutions? The answer is technically yes. We have, as part of the Family Planning 2020, or what is called as the FP 2020 movement, we have a lot of different opportunities where we are able to prevent unintended pregnancies, where we are able to avert unsafe abortions, and we all are able to avert maternal deaths. A lot of money is going into it. There's a lot of promise in this particular area. If, for example, there are a series of new modern contraceptive methods that are available. This is a screen that provides an example of some of those modern contraceptive methods that we now have, that society now has available to it. And of course, as you might imagine, I'm going to give you the same dilemma that has been faced from what we talked about neonatal mortality. Having the solutions, having the technical tools is half the solution, but not the entire solution. And so Melinda Gates had this interview where she talked about the fact that they realize now that they have to focus not on just funding in the area of developing modern contraceptive methods, but in enabling social marketing organizations to reach greater scale. They refer to this as a scaling up problem. We know a problem can be solved. Why can't we scale up the solution of that problem to at large level, to a societal level? How do we apply family planning not only in urban context, but also keep it up with the high rates of urbanization? Investing in a new learning agenda. And they concluded, Melinda in particular, but her team concluded how social networks and norms affect the adoption of modern contraceptives, and who are the key people who are promoting this family planning, and how is their influence impacting whether people are actually using modern family planning methods. So in general, if you think about it, the questions that we couldn't answer was, how do we scale up global health solutions? What are the factors that determine who influences whom and how? This is the who and the how that the title of this talk was, in order to scale up the adoption of health solutions, both amongst health providers and the public in general. How do we utilize this knowledge to optimize the speed and scope of scale up at minimal cost? So to start with the who, if you look at this network, one of the things you can ask yourself as you look at this picture of who talks to whom, which is a hypothetical network, we call it a kite network, is I'm going to ask you to guess who is the most central person in this network. We don't have a lot of interactivity and time, so I'm going to jump ahead and predict some of the answers that you will give. Some of you will say John is the most important person in the network. And of course, John is the connector. John has more connections than anyone else in this network. So that's an easy one to come to the conclusion. Some of you may say Fred is the most important person in this network because Fred is between people who are connected to each other. Fred is a broker in this network. Fewer of you may say that Sue and Sam is in fact the two most important people in this network. And the reason why Sue and Sam are important in this network is because they have the fewest degrees of separation or the shortest distances from everyone on average in the network. They don't have a lot of connections. They're not the brokers, but they can reach everyone in the network directly or indirectly through the fewest steps. That's when we call in networks the degrees of separation. What does that do for them? It makes them very good at being able to find out information in the network. That's why we call it, they're able to take the pulse of the network. If any sentiment is there in the network, it'll reach them because it has to take fewer steps. You can also jokingly say they're the best people to find out about gossip in the network, or they may be the best people to start gossip in the network. So as you can see, the science of networks have allowed us to identify who in the network is well positioned to socially influence other people, find out about it by connections, be able to be a broker in the network or a pulse taker in the network. Let's shift our attention briefly to the how in the network. One of the things that I, as a network scientist, as a focus in terms of network science, only focused on looking at who in the network is well connected. But in the field of communication and in the field of social psychology in particular, There's a lot of focus when they use the word social influence. They don't always think about the who, they think about the how. How do we strategize? How do we persuade people? The field of communication has a sub area called persuasion. And they have come up with at least 6 universal principles of social influence. I am likely to socially influence you if you're returning a favor for me. If I convince you that what I'm asking you to do is consistent with what you did previously. If I tell you other people are doing that, that's called social proof. If I tell you experts are suggesting it, that's called authority. If I like you, I'm more likely to be socially influenced by you. And finally, if I think that something is scarce and there's only a small chance I'm going to get it, I'm more likely to adopt it. Think about this as the tenets of a lot of what people who are interested in public relations, in marketing, are focusing on. When you look at the strategies, when you watch social media, when you watch television, see how many of these are used as a way to socially influence you, either to think about to think differently or to act differently. So these are the hows. So in response to all of this, so this is the same was we're talking about. In response to this, one of the things that my colleague Leslie DeChurch and I focused on was to make the case that, in fact, a lot of what we can understand about socially influence is combining the who, the networks, with the how, what we're looking at here. And so we published an article in 2014 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, where we said integrating social networks, which is the who, and the human social motives, which is the how, to achieve social influence at scale. So what I'm going to do is, we said here, I'm just showing you another table here where we talked about the ways in which we can look at the network on the left, and we can look at the strategies to persuade people on the right. So it's not just important to say who is likely to influence you, but what strategies should they use in order to influence you. I had that realization when I was working in India on the project related to modern contraception. And I'll come back and tell you exactly when that moment happened. Let me give you some background about that project. So this is what I was talking about, the one in India on modern contraceptives. You see my colleagues and collaborators on this who were participating in it. Our focus was to identify what are the strategies and what are the social influence touch points that can help people start using approaches to neonatal mortality, to reduce neonatal mortality. We used a network strategy where we went into a village and we did a survey with 16,000 government employees that were responsible for implementing family health solutions. We asked them questions about who do they seek advice from, who do they share information from, how ready are they to adopt it, how well disposed are they to adopt it. And we found that there were some villages in some districts within a particular state in India called Bihar that were very likely to do it. These were the scale-up districts. They are dark gray here, while the light gray districts were not so likely to adopt it. Our goal was, how do we get people in the dark gray districts to convince people in the light gray districts to be able to, the health workers, to start using these tools like chlorhexidine, for example. And what we did was we created a dashboard where we did the mapping of the network, and we said, so-and-so person, say in this village of East Champaran, is good friends with this other person in Muzaffarpur. So all I would need to do is have the Muzaffarpur person talk to their friend in the East Champaran to convince them that they should use it. When I first presented the dashboard the first version of the dashboard to my colleagues in India, in the state of Bihar, they said, that's great that you're telling me who in the village that has adopted it should talk to the person in the village who hasn't. But then they said, what should that person say? How should that person persuade the other person? And that was the moment I realized that social influence is not just about who, but how. I remember telling them, I said, it's like giving you a dating platform. Some of you may be familiar with these social media dating platforms. It's one thing to say, I recommend you go on a date with that person. But what if the person says, great, thank you, but what should I tell them on my first date? That's the social influence part of it, not just the who, but the how. And that's what led us to then build a dashboard that was focusing not just on who should say, but what to influence whom, and what are the strategies that work best. In my closing moments, I'll give you a quick example of a more recent study that we did in Kenya. I know we have colleagues from Africa, from ICA Kenya, ICA Nigeria on the call. This was a project that I did with some of the same individuals, also funded on a follow-on grant by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. In the field of social psychology, that it's well established that if you ask people how they can use family planning methods, there are theories that will tell you it depends on people's attitudes and about what they see as the perceived norms. This is called theory of reasoned action, theory of planned behavior. Our focus was not on testing the theory of reasoned action and planned behavior that is well established, but asking the question that comes before that. How do people get the attitudes they do, and how do people build the social norms they do? And we were focusing on the extent to which social networks play a role in that. So in order to study this, we went to 2 villages in Kenya, and we interviewed all adults in both of these villages about their attitudes and behaviors related to modern contraceptive. One of these villages was Mozamoyo, where there was a very low prevalence of modern contraceptive use, and another was Ganga A, which was slightly higher, not slightly higher, significantly higher, 58%. We went to the villages, we did focus groups. Remember, these were places where modern contraceptive methods were available, but people were not using it. And as we did the focus groups, we began to ask questions like, why aren't people using it? And we would get answers like, it's not a cost issue, it's not difficulty to use it. I know how to use it, it's cheap. The problem is that when I talk to people in my in-laws, they say I should, a woman would say, my in-laws say, no, I don't want you to use this because they have bad health effects. Factually incorrect, but if you use it, you may never be able to have children. Or a religious leader telling them that for religious reasons they shouldn't use them. Or their spouse telling them that they shouldn't use it because that would be a sign that they are being unfaithful to their spouse by using modern contraceptives. So you see that the reasons why people are not using it has nothing to do with the technology or the science or the cost, but these social norms and the social influence that they're getting. So again, we can ask questions, in this case, with an app on the Android phone, and we asked them 123 questions about their background, awareness of family planning, perception of family planning, use of family planning. These are screenshots where we went into villages and we used the Trellis app to be able to ask them questions about it. As you can see, we had to get their photograph because, like in every part of the world, people have common names, and we wanted to make sure that we were able to distinguish Tim Coombs from some other Tim that we may have, for example. And so we took their addresses, we asked them these kinds of questions, and we built the network. And as you can tell from these networks, the red nodes are female, the blue are males. These are 665 individuals in Mozamoyo, over 1,300 in Ganga A. You begin to see to what extent people's use of modern contraceptives, males or females, might depend upon their social network. I won't go into the technical details, but what we found that was remarkable, for example, is some people, it was not only just whether they talked to people who use it, but what they talked about. Sometimes people who said, well, I believe that God determines when I should have a child. Or modern contraceptive can cause health problems. Or people I value use modern contraceptives. And then things like, I know how to use modern contraceptives. And we were able to isolate not just who influences you, but how they are influencing you based upon their beliefs as well as their use of modern contraceptives. So for example, we found that a person is 0.68 times less likely to use modern contraceptives if they report talking about modern contraceptive with someone who believes that it is God who determines how many children a woman should have. A person is 1.45 times more likely to use it if they talk to somebody who believes that they know how to use it. So this is called the efficacy argument, for example. There are a lot of these kinds of findings in different contexts. But one of the things we did was we took this knowledge and then provided interventions into how people could use this for the government to say, it's not just enough to have it, but who are the touch points? and what are the messages that we need to be able to address that would really increase the scale up of modern contraceptive use in this area. So again, it benefited society because it provided policymakers with intervention strategies on both who and what beliefs to target and also build good sophisticated methodological strategies to infer how network structures can be able to help individuals. Thank you again for all of your time, and I want to thank also all my collaborators as well as the funders of the research that helped this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Nasser Contractor, for this valuable insight and enlightening research finding. Now we move to our last speakers, Professor Doreen Kartikawangi. Hello, Professor. Are you ready?
Hi, Janet.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It is an honor for me to be here with Prof. Coombs and also Prof. Nosir. So I will talk about the strategic communication and future trend, especially the need of innovation in the VUCA world. Next, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So we know that the global landscape of communications is rapidly changing due to advance in digital technologies. Next, please. As an organizations become more interconnected with their stakeholders and communities, as what Professor Coombs and Professor Contractor mentioned earlier, the need for strategic communication that serve a dual purpose, organizational success and also social good, become imperative. So the VUCA environment marked by constant changes and complexities requires organizations to develop communication strategies that are not only effective but also ethical, promoting common good and sustainability. Sustainability has become our focus for Indonesia chapter in promoting those SDGs to be reached by our government. So I will talk about those further. The strategic communication, therefore, must be designed to navigate the new reality by creating influence that resonates with societal values, such as environment sustainability and social responsibility. This is in this context, especially regional and also Indonesian context, the purpose of influence goes beyond organizational growth to encompass broader societal goals, such as environmental preservation and equitable resource distribution. Next, please. We know that VUCA environment, as introduced by Venice and Nanus in 1987, next please, describe a world marked by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. In such world, organizations face continuous disruptions that challenge traditional models of communications. The rapid development of digital networks has only intensified this challenge, where organizations must not only react to change, but also anticipate them. Strategic communication in the VUCA world, therefore, is not about controlling the message, but rather about managing the flow of information and relationships in ways that create stability and trust. A well-structured communications framework involves knowledge management, where information is effectively captured and distributed and also utilized. This ensures that organizations can respond safely to crisis mitigation risks and engage their stakeholders in meaningful dialogue. So one of the key tools for managing communication in this uncertainty environment is to use AI for predictive analysis, And we know that AI allows organizations to forecast trends, perform social listening, and automate routine tasks, also providing strategic insight that enable more effective communications. By leveraging data-driven insight, organization can predict shift in the stakeholder sentiment and also adjust their messaging accordingly. So next, please. About communications and future trends, we know that strategic communication planning always start with formative research, strategy, tactic, and then end by evaluation. So here, I would like to focus on the knowledge management, because knowledge management is essential in today's information-rich society. Next, please. Organization must effectively capture, next please, capture, distribute, and apply knowledge to improve both internal processes and external communications. Next, please. In the context of sustainability, knowledge management, this is the right slide that I would like to explain. In the context of sustainability, knowledge management involves understanding the complex interrelationships between economic, environment, and also social factors. For instance, an organization must track not only its environmental impact, but also how its sustainability initiative resonate with stakeholders. Strategic communication supported by knowledge management allows for the seamless flow of information across various departments and external audience. This flow facilitated better decision-making, ensuring that sustainability efforts are well-informed and strategically aligned with corporate goals. Organizations that can integrate the knowledge management into their communication strategies will be better positioned to drive meaningful change and influence their stakeholders. Furthermore, the role of social capital, networks of relationships and trust built within the outside the organizations become crucial. Social capital fosters collaborations and participation in sustainability efforts. By building the strong relationships with stakeholders, organization can create, a network of support for their sustainability initiative. This network not only amplifies the organization's message, but also enables to engage in meaningful partnership aimed at promoting sustainability. So here we come to the role of purposive influence for sustainability. Purposeful influence is the process by which organization intentionally set the stakeholders' perception and behaviors in support of sustainability objectives. To achieve these communication strategies must be aligned with ethical. I will highlight ethical principle and long-term goals that benefit society and the environment. This includes fostering transparency. Of course, this is a very specific for Indonesia. Transparency, accountability, and engagement around sustainability initiative. That's really important for us. And, one practical framework for driving purposeful influence is the SMART approach to goal setting, like specific, measurable, achievement, relevant, and time-bound. I'm sure that all communications practitioners understand about that. So by setting clear and measurable sustainability goals, organization can craft communication strategies that directly contribute to achieving these outcomes. For example, if an organization goals is to reduce its carbon footprint, its communication strategy might involve engaging stakeholders through transparent reporting and soliciting public participation in energy saving initiatives. So another key component from my perspective is the development of a strong corporate image and reputation. Stakeholders are more likely to support sustainability efforts when they perceive the organization as genuinely committed to the cause. This involves consistent messaging across all platforms, from marketing to internal communication, and of course, public relation and corporate communication, where sustainability is positioned as a core value of the organization. So there are many strategy or tactic that we can use, such as interpersonal communication, organizational media, digital and social media, of course, and also the importance of collaborative partnership and media and public relation. Of course, we will focus on our own media to get earn and share, so we can get more amplifications to build our reputation. About AI, we already understand from what Professor Kum and Professor Contractor mentioned. AI and other emerging technologies are reshaping the way organizations communicate, right? AI tools allow for more efficient data collection, sentiment analysis, and message personalizations. So by analyzing unstructured data from social media, news outlet, and other digital resources, AI can provide valuable insight into how stakeholders perceive sustainability initiative. For instance, AI can be used to automate social media monitoring, helping communication professionals to track the public response to a sustainability campaign in real time. This allows organizations to be proactive, responding quickly to any negative sentiments or misinformations, thus ensuring the communication strategy remains on track. Furthermore, AI-driven predictive analytics can forecast trends in public opinion and consumer behavior or audience behavior, enabling organizations to fine-tune their messaging strategies before crisis emerge. And in a VUCA world, this ability to anticipate and adapt to changing stakeholders' expectation is critical for maintaining both relevance and trust. So, as a conclusion, strategic communication, when applied with focus on purposeful influence, serve as more powerful tool for driving societal change towards sustainability, leveraging knowledge management and what else? Building social capital, utilizing cutting-edge technology. Organization can craft communication strategies that resonate with their stakeholders and promote the common good. So in a world characterized by complexity, the common good in world characterized, it's more important than ever for organizations to adopt communication strategies that not only drive business success, but also contribute to the well-being of society. So last presentation, next please. This is my purposeful communication. I have to promote this on behalf of World PR Forum. So please join us in the academic forum, and we can get the special prize. Also, we can publish our works in many publication, many journals that have a collaboration with World PR Forum. So that's all from me. Thank you so much, and let's have discussion. Thank you, Ms. Janet.
Thank you, Professor Doreen, for your insightful presentations. You've given us a lot for reflect on the regarding shifting organizational communication nowadays, and also to promote the call for paper for the World PR Forum. Yeah. Okay, now we would like to transition for our Q&A session. This is a great opportunity for all of you to engage directly with our esteemed speakers and ask any questions you may have. Please feel free to type your questions in the chat box or raise your hand, and we'll invite you to speak. To get things started, would anyone like to throw the question from the Prof. Timothy Combs, Professor Nasser, or Professor Doreen? Please, silahkan. This is your chance to gain valuable insight. And what I see in the chat box, we get questions from the...
Mbak Janet, sepertinya harus dari chapters dulu. Sebelum Q&A, dari chapters dulu sudah menunggu.
Okay, yeah, okay, sorry. Okay, so chapters, please. You want to share for the information, asking questions? Yes, Professor Padma, yeah. Screen is yours. Okay.
Okay, it's good evening in India, and I think in some parts of the world it's still morning. So good evening and good morning. And it's my pleasure that, we could participate in this thanks to technology. And I just like to, reflect upon certain things that Professor Timothy Combs and Professor Noshir Contractor talked about, in this era of global communication, and how still, like especially when Professor Timothy Combs was talking about, the crisis communication coming from the global south. We do have, especially the global warming is something that is already affecting us. I come from a coastal town, and we've had heavy rains this year, flooding and sea erosion, which is like, a lot of places getting wiped into the sea, or the sea changing its course and things of that kind. Now, these are things that is not going to be only to this particular area, it's going to affect the rest of the world. But then these are also affecting women and children in a big way, families, I would rather say, in a big way, communities. And how are we going to cope about this? And I think the governments have taken certain initiatives, but it's not successful, like Professor Noshir pointed out. And that I liked his idea of how he talked about, who to influence and how to influence. And not only in the maternal mortality and the infant mortality cases, but we had the polio vaccine campaign in India, and India has been successfully, able to eradicate polio in India. And this was something that really worked in that campaign, and that's how this campaign has been successful in India, because yes, initially there was a lot of resistance by families to get their children vaccinated, especially in areas where mothers were not very educated, or family in backward areas in certain communities. And what the government did was that they chose people from the community itself. In fact, after a certain stage where the health workers in the community, which we call them by different names in India and different parts of the country, there are 3 different levels of community health workers, and most of them happen to be women. So with the help of children, what they did is, a little grown-up children who were 12, 13, who could go to homes, talk to mothers, talk to the children. And on days when the government decided to give the vaccine, they would all be, these children with the community health workers would go house to house, door to door, and see if children are there in that house of the polio vaccination age. and get them to the center where the polio drops was given. It was not even a vaccine, it was a drops. And this was continuously done for a number of years. And they used a film star, Amitabh Bachchan, who's quite popular in the country, to talk about the importance of that vaccine. In certain communities where the communities itself were resistant, they used doctors or influencers from the community whom the parents were taking the children when they were sick. They used them to convince the parents that it has to be vaccinated and what is the benefits of it. And it did not happen in one day. It took more than a decade for India to eradicate it. And given the size of population of India, a decade of eradication now, I think, every mother, the moment the child is born, within a month, the vaccination process starts for a lot of other things. And they have developed digital tools by way of which the community health workers are able to keep a track of mothers the moment they conceive till the child is 5 years old. So, but then that's communication, that who should, there's that strategic importance in the network, that who should be first targeted, and then how do we, build upon it. I think that's something which is very essential as far as, we are talking about either health communication or disaster communication or even crisis communication during COVID. Simple things like maintaining your wearing a mask became a task for the government to convince people that you need to wear a mask all the time that you're going out in public. So these kind of things we have examples in front of us. Now, if you look at from the other side, from the corporate world, where Doreen was talking about sustainability and strategy and tactics, I think global communication today for the corporate world is very important, because it's not only about translating their contents, it's also about adapting their messages to align with the local sensibilities, customs, and consumer behavior. They no longer can, just whatever is there in English, just translate it into the local language. It doesn't work. They have to cater it to the local sensibilities. And also, there are benefits of this global communication if they practice it, because it not only enhances their brand engagement and cultural engagement, because if there is a cultural engagement, there's more cultural insights and narratives into their story. They're also driving innovations. And it also helps in a way, in which global consumer preferences, like wherever you see marketing and advertising is what shapes perceptions worldwide. And these are also affecting people's views on social and political issues which we see in the world today. So I think global communication and strategic communication is important, not only in certain areas, but it has a wide range of scope that I see it today as, even in international politics and diplomacy, soft power, they play a very important role. Like today, when India is seen as a growing world power, I think the strategic communication that our leaders have been doing plays a very important role in it. And I conclude with that. Thank you for giving this opportunity.
Thank you, Professor Padmarani, Chair of the ICA India chapter, for your thought and your insights. So I would like to invite Ms. Majaki Kanyeki from the ICA Kenya chapter, please.
Okay, thank you so much. It's a great honor to be here. Greetings from Sister Professor A.L. Lando from Kenya. She had a meeting, so she's double booked and should have loved to be here, but she sends her greetings. So my questions are I had a question. I'll ask both of them and then they can respond. And the first question is to Professor Combs. Thanks for your very fascinating presentation on crisis and risk management. Please clarify how testing partner dissemination pathway, which is one of the models you mentioned, is done or executed when disaster response is covering a large population and such as a city. So for example, if the hurricane or the heat wave is taking place, some of the stakeholders are like the first responders. So in Kenya, then we have WhatsApp groups for first responders like police, doctors, paramedics, but the communication does not disseminate properly at the time of crisis. But so my question is, how do you test partner dissemination pathway? I suppose this is done ahead of the disaster so that when it happens, it's a smoother operation. Questions for Professor Noshir is as follows. And thank you again for doing a research on my country. I'm so excited. I can't wait to read it. And thank you for the insightful presentation. In Kenya, which is where the study was done, opinion leaders like the chiefs in the villages are mainly male. How did your research cover how these opinion leaders, especially the men, influence the uptake of contraceptives or family planning or fertility? Because then they look like they're obstacles. They're creating a bottleneck. Do you use the opinion leaders? How do they cascade the message down to the people? Where, especially in a society where contraceptives is seen as a women's problem, not a man's problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kanyeki, for your questions and your response. So we jump in directly for the Q&A session then. So I would like to invite Professor Tim, Professor Nasir, and Professor Doreen to give some response or explanation about the question from our partner from the ICA, please. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'll provide a quick sort of answer on the idea of kind of message testing. And what that is you need to construct, you have to have a training exercise, and that becomes critical to all of it. And in that exercise, what you're going to do is you're going to have your messages, which you kind of worked ahead of time with your groups, figure out what messages people can understand and process. But what you do is then you test the delivery system and you send it out and you see if it actually does flow through the channels as you intended. And did it actually then reach the constituents? So there's that evaluative component to it. So it's a training exercise that was done. For instance, in the United States, typically the first Tuesday of every month is when you do sort of testing of messages, sort of thing. But you would want to do this maybe once a year, test it out, make sure everyone is really in the loop. Did everyone who need to be reached get reached? So you do the follow-up, like, all right, I have certain partners. Did they actually get the message they were supposed to get? And did they relay it on? So you're testing to make sure all the channels actually work and will distribute it properly as it can be. And that way you find out ahead of time if you've got problems like, okay, let's say you use WhatsApp. Well, people didn't check it or they didn't do it. So you can then remind people, this is what you need to be aware of. You need to make sure you check these. You need to make sure these messages are then relayed. So everyone knows it's a test, and you set that up in advance and you see how the messages flow through the channels and where the problems are.
Thank you, Professor Tim, for your comments. So maybe Professor Nasir?
Thank you again. I must say that I did not plan that I would be showcasing two studies from two countries that are represented on the ICA as the ICA guests here from India and from Kenya. So that worked out quite well. I cannot take credit for doing that. But it is a testament that these are important countries from the global south, which, along with Indonesia, where I've also had the privilege, perhaps not of spending as much time as Tim, but spending a bit of time visiting over the last few years, that it's important for us as part of global communication community to recognize that not all the problems start and end in the Western world. And so I'm glad that we are focusing on problems from the global south in this particular session today. The question that I was asked about, I think both in terms of, I think, Padma, your points about how it applies to the Indian context, to polio, is a fascinating case to look at it. And also, I think part of the message that I want to leave us with, and I already responded to some of it on the chat, is you can look at what we did as providing specific insights. But to me, I think the bigger message is not the specific findings that I reported today or that we are publishing from these studies, but the approach, the methodology of combining the who and the how. And to me, I think it is really quite ironic that even though these are allied fields, that people are still keeping separate for the most part. I don't blame anyone for it. I plead guilty. I'm the one who has spent a lot of time doing who. Folks like Tim have spent a lot of time doing how. And so it's not anyone's fault, but I think that if we really want to think about training the next generation of scholars, the next generation of research, we need to find ways to be able to leverage both of these insights and not keep this artificial academic boundary in place here. In terms of the question about in Kenya, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right that one of the things we discovered was that it was very, very dominated by males. But there is an important difference that I want to point to. It was dominated by husbands. It was dominated by fathers-in-law. It was dominated by male religious leaders, and in some cases, male political leaders or civic leaders in this. And the irony, of course, is that almost all of them, it was good to know that they are influential. That was the good news. We were able to identify them clearly as the influential people. What was the bad news? They almost were universally opposed to modern contraceptive methods. And so, it's nice to find out who the influencers are. It's terrible to find out that you are dealing with influencers who have exactly the opposite message than you're trying to convince. Now, I said that there was a caveat. The caveat was, we went into this largely based upon the foundation and other leaders, including groups that we worked with in Nairobi, actually, in the nation's capital. We worked with the Institute for Reproductive Health, which is an international institute for reproductive health with offices in Kenya and other parts of the world. And they helped us a lot with our ground research and gave us a lot of guidance, and we learned a lot from them in the process. However, one of the things we assumed, and we included in the network, in our survey, in the 123 questions, was who are the people who you talk to about these issues, and what do they tell you, and how do they persuade you one way or the other? The missing group that almost no one cited was health workers. You heard me right. Health workers. There are a lot of health workers in these villages. We spend, the government and the foundations and NGOs spend an enormous amount of time focusing on health workers. And we were shocked to see how little influence and how infrequently they were cited by individuals, especially women. To the point, and I'm talking not just about doctors, but also healthcare workers on the ground. I was so surprised, and my team was so surprised, that we went back to look at the data again and again to see, did we make a mistake? Was there a coding issue? Was there something that didn't play out correctly? And every time we came back with the same puzzling but unequivocal finding, and that is that health workers were just not cited. It's not that they were not there. They were there. They were not cited as people who were really influencing the decisions of individuals on things like modern contraceptive methods. Obviously, this was a finding that has very strong policy implications and practitioner implications for the people that we were working with. And we shared it with them. They were as surprised, if not more surprised than us. And they said, we spent all this money on them, and you're telling us that they don't get cited. You know, we were sorry to be the bearers of bad news, but hopefully accurate news. So that would be my response to what you were saying. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Professor Nashar, for your insight. And Professor Dorian, any comments about this?
Well, actually, we kind of have a similar experiences with what Prof. Combs and Prof. Nosir has on his research. We experience how opinion leader play significant roles in influencing our community, our people, because they still believe in who and how that Prof. Nosir already explained, especially for the community relations or development communications. I'm really agree with that, and also in mitigating in identifying the problem, so the issue can be managed and not become a crisis, as Prof. Combs mentioned earlier. I think Ekaite is here. Ekaite, we miss you, Ekaite. Miss Janet, Ekaite is here. I think you can ask her to give a comment. So
Okay.
that's my comment on the questions, and also based on what Prof. Combs and Prof. Nosir already explains, and also my concern on the VUCA words and how we have to develop a strategic communications in order to reach the goals of SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dorian, for your comments. Okay, I would like to invite Ekate George, chairs of ICA Nigeria chapter. Are you here? Could you please open your camera?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I can't open my camera because electricity just went off, and it's gotten really dark in here. But if it comes back on, I'll get my camera on. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me, please?
Okay. Okay, Mas Adin, could you please?
Hello, can you hear me? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we are able to hear
It's
you.
perfect, Ekaite.
Hello?
Yeah.
It's clear. Yeah.
Oh,
Please.
that's fine. In terms of the presentation, I just wanted to say that I listened to a lot of it before I had to go off to a Nigerian chapter event and get it started. I want to say that for the two presentations, I can see how the researches work within the context of Nigeria here, and some of the challenges that are being faced socially, and the manner in which the research applies, especially with the issue of Professor Nosha highlighted. I really gained some great insight in the presentation. And I think that truly there are some questions. While these issues are on ground and the work that has been done continues to be done, we still find the communication gap from development stakeholders and the population that we find here. So maternal health is still a big problem that communication needs to be applied to solve. So I would commend the presentation. I just wanted to give some context as to what's going on in the country. I wanted to talk about the factors that doing an a review of strategic communication in Nigeria. Some of the factors that have shaped strategic communication in Nigeria continues to evolve. But this evolution has been because of changes in political, economic, social, and factors that have to do with technology. If we look at Nigeria's development in phases, we can say that Nigeria had this phase where strategic communication was used for colonial influence. We had government established newspapers in pre-1960s that will use colonial policies. Then, still within that period, you had newspapers like
Hello, Miss Ekate. Okay, unfortunately, I think there is a
sorry, I got knocked off by the internet.
yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay.
Yes. So the method moved when Nigeria moved past the pre-colonial, the pre-independence to the post-independence. Then you had communication controlled by government still, even in independence, and dominated by people who wanted to influence the public and rally domestic and international support to the formation of a new government to move past colonialism to the Nigerian government. Again, within that era, strategic communication was something that was mostly controlled by government. We didn't have much, we didn't have private media, we didn't have businesses who were able to go ahead and look at social issues per the interests and the ideologies that were people-centered rather than those that the government wanted to push. Then we moved from that era to the military era. Still, this was controlled by government. The different military coups and authoritarian governments that came out of the military regimes, they censored and suppressed the media. But within this period, in the 1990s, was when private media emerged. So we have cronies of military heads who were now allowed to own newspapers and television stations. We had like the Guardian and Newswatch newspapers then that started to influence and engage in strategic communication and move into society, and even had businesses who had interests, that favored what the government, the military regimes of the time wanted to happen. But from 1990 to the present time, we have had a liberalization of the media. It's a return to democracy in 1999. We know what we've experienced here. Some people say it's a brand of democracy that is peculiar to Nigeria. We know what's happening across Africa, across West Africa that we live inside. But what is true is that now citizens, businesses, corporate organizations, development agencies have moved into strategic communication and start using it, not just to causes that the government wants to promote, because that's also happening, but to causes that are dear to corporate organizations and brands, to causes that, of course, politicians want to campaign on, and most importantly, to citizen journalists, to issues in society that Nigerians themselves want to be brought to the forefront of public opinion and to influence.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, Miss Ekate, I think there is some challenge, yeah. So I think yeah, all the questions actually already answered by speakers in the chat box. So I think this is the last moment. So I will give conclusion. So here's the conclusion for this discussion. I would like to highlight the importance of the understanding crisis communication in light of various challenges related to changes in the communications, behaviors, and organizational setting, especially with the emergence of the new media and the development of the artificial intelligence. So understanding crisis communication has become increasingly crucial in today's rapidly evolving digital landscape. The emergence of the new media platform and the advancement of the artificial intelligence have fundamentally transformed how information is disseminated, consumed, and interpreted. This shift presents both opportunities and challenges for organizations facing crisis in the global context. So, once again, give round applause for our esteemed speakers. Give a reaction with love, with claps, with thumbs up. Okay, please share the moment with us. Okay, give love. Okay, okay. So, thank you so much. Professor Timothy Kong, Professor Nasir Contractor, Professor Doreen Kartawani, and also the ICA chapter in Nigeria, in India, in Kenya, and all the participants who are here today. Thank you for your attentions. Before we close, I want to remind you everyone about the call for papers. So thank you. I will give to Miss Anggia from Prahomas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Janet and all the speakers. So we encourage all of you to participate in WPRF 2024, whether through submitting a papers or attending the forum in Bali. For the submission of full papers, we are extending the deadline of registration until the 30th of September. Please visit our website, wprforum.co.id, and click Global Communication Knowledge Conference at the upper right side to get a landing page for its full detail about submission deadline. So we are also proud to announce that we have gathered top scholars in the field to be our peer reviewers headed by global scholars such as Professor Emeritus Anne Gregory, who works on global capabilities framework, has become the benchmark of how professionals in public relations and communication management perform at their best. So there is a Prof. Mike Hardy, whose research and writing now focus on the role and power of public leadership, and also Prof. Jasper Falkhammer, the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Communication Management. We have also affiliated with 14 journals publishers, highlighting the Journal of Communication Management, Emerald Publishing, Scopus Q1, ASEAN Journal for Public Opinion Research, Center for ASEAN Public Opinion Research, and Collaboration Initiative, Scopus Q2, Plaridel, University of the Philippines College of Mass Communication, Scopus Q4, This is a great opportunity to enhance your skills in academic writing and boost your chance of getting published in Scopus Index Journal. This is truly a chance to elevate your presence in the global academic and professional community. It's an opportunity to contribute to the discussion that shape the future of public relations and to be part of the solution that drive purposeful influence for the common good. It will undoubtedly be an unforgettable experience of learning, collaboration, innovation in the field of public relations. We're excited about what's in store and hope to see many of you in Bali this November. Thank you once again for joining us today. Looking forward to seeing you at the World Public Relations Forum in Bali. Have a great day ahead and pleasant evening. Thank you all moderators, speakers, and all the participants. Good evening.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Prof. Contractor. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a pleasant day.
Thank you.